Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Navamaṇimālai. Namaskaram. Today I'm going to be talking about the 8th verse of Śrī Aruṇācala Navamaṇimālai. The first 3 verses of Navamaṇimālai are all about the greatness of Aruṇācala and his grace. Verses 4 to 7 are all prayers, and verses 8 and 9, these final 2 verses, are they're somewhat autobiographical. Bhagavan is talking about his own the grace that Aruṇācala bestowed upon him. The context in which Bhagavan composed this 8th verse is as follows. That is, there was a renowned poet called Ottukutta. In the 12th century, he was a court poet and minister to 3 generations of Chola kings. In one of his verses, he praises a wealthy man for some gifts he had given him, and he did so in a traditional manner, first identifying himself by naming his parents and the place where he was born, then describing the gifts and their great value, and finally praising the giver and his bountifulness. A devotee of Bhagavan's called Ishwaraswami once showed this verse to Bhagavan, admiring its beauty and poetic qualities, and asked Bhagavan to compose a similar verse, in response to which he composed this verse. That is, this verse is what is known in Tamil as Sandapa. That Sanda comes from the Sanskrit word chandas. Sandapa are particularly, they're verses that follow a very strict rhythmic pattern. And for example, in this verse, there are no long vowels. That is, in Tamil, there are 12 vowels. 5 of them are short and 7 of them are long. But this verse has only short vowels, except for the very last syllable, which is a long vowel. And they're following a particular rhythmic pattern. Every verse, and every foot of each line ends with a consonant. So it produces a very rhythmic effect. So it has great poetic beauty. That's why Ishwaraswami, who himself was a minor poet, he admired the poetic quality of the verse composed by Ottukutta and asked Bhagavan to compose a similar verse. But Ottukutta had sung this verse praising a rich man for giving him gifts. But in Bhagavan's verse, he praised Aruṇācala for giving him the infinitely precious gift of his own state. And thereby he indirectly indicated that poetic talent is a divine gift and should therefore not be squandered by using it to praise worldly gifts or worldly givers, but should be used only to praise God and the gift of his divine grace. So that's the context in which Bhagavan composed this verse, and that's the implied teaching in this verse, that this is what poets should use if you are blessed with that talent of poetry, you should use it only for spiritual, not for worldly praise. So because Bhagavan is following the same pattern that Ottukutta followed in his verse, so Bhagavan first identifies himself by referring to the town in which he was born and his parents. Then he talks about the great gift that Aruṇācala gave him, namely his own state, and then he praises Aruṇācala. So I'll first read the verse just to give an idea of how it. Well, any Tamilians listening will probably be familiar with this verse, but for those who are not familiar with the verse, just to give an idea of the rhythmic sound, the verse. I can't sing, so I will just read it. Buvi cholpongidum, puvi chulpungavan, puri kuponian, suri kutchundaran, tava kutchundarum, sati kutpananan, talatil punbulan, sharakil tumburum, tavi kuttunjidum, badi kutchundalum, Tarekat Padam, Enokutandanam, Shiva Kachinmayam, Cherika Tanmayam, Jegatil Tunusum, Porupuchamalay. So that is the verse. The meaning of this verse is, in the first sentence is, Bhagavan says, the meaning of the first sentence is, in Churi, which among the towns of God in the world is called the surging place, I was born to the virtuous ascetic Sundaram and to the faithful wife Sundaram. So that's the meaning of the first sentence. When he says in Churi, he's referring to the town of Tiruchuri, which is the town where he was born. And that Tiruchuri has a famous Shiva temple. In fact, Bhagavan was born just out, and the house in which Bhagavan was born, his parents' house, was just outside the temple. And inside the temple, there is a tank, a theatre, that is a holy pond. And a remarkable feature of that pond is every year in the Tamil month of Marsi, which is from mid-February to mid-March, the water in that tank rises up. And Bhagavan himself, later, I think it's recorded in Day by Day or somewhere, that Bhagavan says he remembers as a child, every year they used to observe this, how the water rose up. And there's a Puranic story about this, that the world was once under a flood, and Shiva with his Trisula, his trident, he pierced the earth in order to let all the water drain out. So when the water drained out, just like in a bathtub, if you take the plug out of a bathtub, the water goes round and round and round and down the hole. The same thing happened. All the water went round and round. That's the meaning of Suri. Suri is going round and round. So that's how the town is called Tiruchuri. So what he says is, in Churi, which among the towns of God, by towns of God he means the Shiva Kshetras, in the world, which among the towns of God in the world is called the surging place. Surging place because of that tank where the water surges up every year. I was born to a virtuous ascetic Sundaram. Sundaram is the name of his father, and to his virtuous wife Sundaram. That is, Sundara is a Sanskrit word that means beauty. In Tamil, the masculine form of it is Sundaran. The feminine form is usually Sundari, but can also be Sundaram. Bhagavan's mother, her actual name was Arahamal, but Arahu in Tamil means beauty. So Bhagavan's father was named Beauty and his mother was named Beauty. And Bhagavan refers to this in the second verse of Atma-vichara. Very beautifully, Bhagavan pays tribute to his parents. Indirectly, he pays tribute to his parents and the love between them. In the second verse of Atma-vichara, he says, Arahu sundaram bol ahamum niyum mutrabinama irupom Aruṇācala. That means like Arahu and Sundaram. That has a double meaning because Arahu and Sundaram, they're two words, but have the same meaning. So though they are two in form, they are one in substance. That their meaning is the same. That's one meaning. And also, can also be taken as he's referring to his parents, Arahu and Sundaram. So just like they had such a harmonious, loving relationship, that though they were two in outward form, inwardly they were one, at heart they were one. So Bhagavan gives a beautiful tribute there to his parents, because only such very, very pure-hearted and out of the love between such a pure-hearted couple would Aruṇācala take birth in human form as Bhagavan Ramana. So that's the meaning of that verse is like Arahu and Sundaram, may I and you be united and completely non-different. That is, it can be split in two ways. We can take it as ahamum, niyam, that's I and you. It can be, the next word can be taken either as utru, which means uniting, coming together, joining, or it can be taken to mean mutru, which means completely. So if we take it as completely, it means completely non-different. May you and I uniting be completely non-different, like Arahu and Sundaram. That verse, we are reminded of that verse when we read this verse. And like in that verse, he indirectly pays tribute to his mother and father. In this verse, he refers to his father as a virtuous ascetic. That is, he describes him as he describes his father Punniyan. Punniyan means a virtuous man. And he says, Sundaran Taviku, Tavaku. Tavaku means, in Tamil, Tavam Tamil is a Tamil form of the Sanskrit word tapas, so, which means asceticism. So Tavaku means to the ascetic, to the virtuous ascetic Sundaram. And Sundaram Satiku. Sati means a virtuous woman or faithful wife. So he refers to both his parents as very virtuous, meaning they're very pure-hearted, and to them he was born. So in this first sentence, he is introducing himself by talking about the place where he was born and the pure-hearted couple to whom he was born. Then in the next sentence, he talks about the great gift that Aruṇācala gave him. The meaning of the next sentence is the red hill God who adheres in the world so that what consists of pure awareness glows, and so that what consists of that flourishes, gave to me his state, his heart overflowing with joy, so that the miserable distress in the wickedness of the vile senses in the world perishes. That is the red hill God is Semporupu means red hill. Semmalai means is God. Semmal means what is means what is excellent or great or superior. It can refer either to a great person or to God or Shiva. So they're red hill God. That's Aruṇācala is described as the red hill. So the red hill God implies God in the form of the red hill. And he says he adheres in the world. When he says adheres in the world, what that implies is he graciously, intimately, and steadfastly exists and shines. That is, he is the underlying reality, the substance of this world appearance. So he adheres in this world. And he adheres in this world, why? He says, so that Chinmayam glows and Tanmayam flourishes. Um, the words he uses are chinmayam is a Sanskrit word, but which means what consists of chit, what consists of pure awareness. Tanmayam means what consists of tat. Tat refers to Brahman. So essentially, chinmayam and tanmayam both refer to the same thing. They're both referring to Brahman. Um, uh, so I often used to wonder why Bhagavan says, so that chinmayam, the verb he uses there is shivaka. Shivaka literally means so that it reddens, but that's a way of expressing so that it glows, so that it shines brightly, just like if you blow on the embers of a fire, they redden. They become as they come in contact with the oxygen, they become redder. So that's the redden. The word that literally means it reddens. It implies so that it glows, so that it shines brightly. Um, and so that Tanmayam flourishes. I used to think why he says Chinmayam and Tanmayam, because essentially they're the same thing. Then it occurred to me when I was thinking about it, Chinmayam means is referring to the pure awareness. When that pure awareness glows, in other words, when it shines so brightly, but one often refers to Aruṇācala in the bright rays swallowing everything. In Akramlai, there's a verse, Sakalam Virangum Kadiroli Yenamana Jala Jamalati Aruṇācala. That means Sakalam Virangum Kadiroli Inna means the sun. So sun of bright rays that swallows everything in Jala Jamalati Aruṇācala. Sorry, Mana Jala Jamalati. Yeah, make my heart lotus blossom. So there he's comparing Aruṇācala to the sun. Only in the light of the sun can the lotus blossom. Likewise, only in the light of the sun of jnana, the light of pure awareness, the sun of pure awareness, can the heart blossom. And he says that sun swallows everything, because when the self-knowledge dawns, ego is thereby dissolved, and when ego is dissolved, everything else is dissolved along with it. The same idea is there in the first verse of Aruṇācala Pancharatnam. He says, Arul Nirevana Amarakadale, ocean of grace, Karuna Purna Sudabde, Arul Nirevana, yes, ocean of nectar, which is the fullness of grace, Virikadiral Yavam, with your spreading rays swallowing everything. Virikadiral Yavam Virangam, swallowing everything. Aruna Giri Paramatma Ve, Arunagiri, who's the Paramatma, the supreme self, the supreme reality, Paramatma Ve, Kila Olappu Nandrai, my heart which is beginning to blossom, Kila Olappu Nandrai, so it blossoms for Nandrai, Arunagiri Paramatma Ve Kilarappu Nandrai, Viriparityāha Vilangu, shine so that my heart blossoms fully. My heart which is just beginning to blossom, so that it blossoms fully. So in both these places, he's referring to Aruṇācala as the son of jnana. The son of jnana, it's only in the son of jnana that the heart can blossom. And when the heart blossoms, that swallows everything. So when he says here in this verse, so that Chinmayam glows, what he implies is so that pure awareness shines forth, swallowing everything. And when that pure awareness has swallowed everything, what remains is Tanmayam, and Tanmayam flourishes. When he says Tanmayam flourishes, what he means is Tanmayam, that Brahman alone remains shining as one without a second. So it's it's not immediately obvious, but when we think about it, this is the implication. So that what he refers to as the glowing of Chinmayam is the shining forth of pure awareness, swallowing ego and everything else. And what then remains flourishing as the only one thing, as Ekameva Advaityam, one only without a second, that is Tanmayam. So Chinmayam and Tanmayam are essentially the same thing, but the Chinmayam is referring to a chit aspect, whereas the knowledge or awareness aspect, whereas Tanmayam is the being aspect, the Sat aspect, which the chit and that is Sat and Chit are one, but it's just the way it's beautifully described here, and very, very, though the words that is the meaning of the words is very simple, but actually a very deep implication is there underlying the surface meaning of the word. That is often in Bhagavan's verses, we need to understand not just the meaning of the words, but the implication. And the implication often isn't clear at first, but when we meditate on these verses, when we recite these verses with love, slowly, their meaning reveals itself to us. Just like when we turn our attention within, our real nature gradually reveals itself. It shines more. It's purikum. That's what Bhagavan calls sprana. It reveals itself. It shines forth, makes itself known. So Bhagavan is saying here that Aruṇācala exists in this world, adheres in this world, both in the form of the outward form of Aruṇācala and as the inner substance of all things, that is the reality of all things. Just like the rope adheres in the snake. That is the snake is nothing but a rope. Likewise, this whole world is nothing but Aruṇācala, which is Chinmayam and Tanmayam, that Satchit, that pure Satchit. It's the underlying reality. So that's his description of Aruṇācala. And what does he say about Aruṇācala? Tan padam enuku tandanam, gave to me his state. Tan padam, in this case, it means state. In the next verse, he also uses the word padam. There it can mean either feet or state. But here it means state. He gave to me his state, and he describes it beautifully. His heart overflowing with joy. He says, tan ulum tarika. That means with his heart overflowing with joy, gave to me his state. That is, Aruṇācala wants nothing more than wants nothing other than to give us his own state, because he is our own reality. So he's ever ready to give us his state, but in order for that, we need to be willing to surrender ourselves to him, because he gives us his state by swallowing us completely. So until we are willing to surrender ourselves completely to him, to allow him to swallow us, he doesn't, and he won't swallow us until we are willing, he won't devour us until we're willing to give ourselves to him. But when we give ourselves to him, when we surrender to him entirely, with great joy, he will bestow upon us his own state. That means he'll absorb us and make us one with himself. And then and then he describes why he gave his own state, so that the miserable distress in the wickedness of the vile senses in the world perishes. That implies, so that the miserable distress of my life lived in the wickedness of the vile senses in the world flourishes. That is, so long as we rise as ego, we are caught up in the wickedness of the vile senses. Why are the senses described as wild and as wicked? Because what actually exists is only one without a second. But when we rise as ego, we see that one as many. And the senses implies not only the five sense organs, but also the inner sense, the mind. Through these six senses, we see the one indivisible reality, our own self, as all this multiplicity. That's why he describes the senses, which indirectly includes the mind, as vile and wicked, because they rob us of our, well, it's actually what robs us of our real state is ego. But ego operates through the mind and five senses to project all this multiplicity. And so long as we're in this state of ego, in which we experience all this multiplicity through the channel of the mind and the five senses, we're in a state of miserable distress, because our real nature, as Bhagavan makes clear in the first verse of the first paragraph of Nana, Bhagavan explains why our real nature is infinite happiness. But as soon as we rise as ego, we limit ourselves. So as a limited ego, we cannot experience infinite happiness. So the very nature of ego is to be always dissatisfied. So as ego, because we are dissatisfied, we have likes, dislikes, desires, attachments. All these arise out of our dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is what in Sanskrit is called dukkha. The satisfaction is sukha, happiness, and dissatisfaction is dukkha, misery. So when Bhagavan talks about this state of being in the wickedness of the five senses as miserable distress, that is because we can never be happy. We can never be truly happy. We can never be truly satisfied by anything less than the infinite happiness which is what we actually are. So only when Aruṇācala swallows us and thereby bestows upon us his own state, will this miserable distress of living in this state of multiplicity, this state of ego and phenomena, will this come to an end? And when he said he gave to me his state, his heart overflowing with joy, when he gives to us his state, that means he makes us one with him. So his heart overflowing with joy is our heart overflowing with joy, because his heart and our heart are one and the same. So there's so much beautiful, that is, the poetry of this verse is very beautiful. But when we go into when we ponder on the meaning of it and go deep into the meaning of it, the meaning is even more beautiful than the words in which Bhagavan expressed that meaning. So it's such a beautiful verse, this one. And Bhagavan is here talking about his own experience, that Aruṇācala, who is, of course, his own reality, because Bhagavan and Aruṇācala are one and the same, gave to him his own state. His giving to us his state means, what is his state? His state is the state of just being. So it's only when we cease rising as ego that we are established in his state. So his state, of course, is our own state, our own real state. So that it's only in this state of non-rising, what Bhagavan refers to as gave me his state, it means the state of just being without rising as ego. The state that he describes beautifully in verse 27 of Ulladu, in which he says, Nanudiyadu ullanile, namaduvai ullanile. The state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are that. So that state in which we are, that is the state of Aruṇācala, the state of just being as we actually are. And that is the state in which we cease rising as ego. So long as we rise as ego, we are caught up in this miserable distress in the wickedness of the vile senses. But when we cease rising as ego and merge forever back into our real state, our heart will overflow with joy, and this miserable distress will perish forever. So it's such a beautiful description that Bhagavan gives us here of what is the state for which we are all aspiring, that state of non-rising of ego. That is what is liberation. It's nothing but that. Bondage is nothing but the rising of ego. Liberation is nothing but the non-rising of ego. And that is our real state. That's our natural state. That's the state in which we ever actually are, but we seem to be separated from that state because of our rising as ego. So yeah, it's just so beautifully described here, and so much deep implication in these words of Bhagavan. Om Namo Bhagavate Śrī Aruṇācala Navamaṇimālai.
So the first question is, does having dreams bear any relation to the state of mind? That is, does pure mind have less dreams? Did Bhagavan say anything on this? Thank you.
When we talk of pure mind, the mind itself is an impurity. So any purity of mind is a relative state. That is, as we progress in the spiritual path, the mind is purified. The purification of mind is called chitta suddhi. Chitta means, often means mind in general, but it means in particular the will. In other words, all our likes, dislikes, desires, and attachments. So when these decrease and we love nothing other than just to be as we are, that is the state of purity of mind. But so long as ego persists, so long ego is the root of mind, so long as ego and consequently mind persists, all this dreaming will continue. So dreams are not just the dreams that occur at night when we are during sleep at night. According to Bhagavan, or any state in which we experience the difference between subject and object, any state in which we rise as ego and experience phenomena is a dream. So this dream will not come to this. The dreaming will continue so long as we continue to rise as ego. Dreaming, that is, as soon as we rise as ego, we project and experience a dream body and a dream world. So dreaming will not come to an end until ego comes to an end. The state in which ego is that is the root impurity in the mind. That is, the impurities in mind are all the vasanas, the seeds that give rise to the likes, dislikes, desires, and attachments. But the root of all those vasanas is the one whose vasanas they are, namely ego. So ego is the root impurity. Only when that root impurity is eradicated that root impurity is itself the dreamer. So only when the dreamer comes to an end will the dreaming come to an end. We shouldn't be looking for a reduction in the dreaming, because the dreams are all what appears when we rise as ego. If we want to cease rising as ego, we should not be concerned about, let there be any number of dreams. To whom do all these dreams appear? We should turn our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. Only when our attention is fixed firmly on ourselves will we as ego subside, and will all the dreams subside along with us. In verse 6 of Aruṇācala Ashtakam, Bhagavan describes how he starts by saying that there's one reality. There's that the light of awareness, which is Aruṇācala. That alone is what actually exists. But in that, there's an Adiseya Shakti, a wonderful power. That means the power of Maya, which is mind or ego. And from that, all these thoughts, all these that everything is projected from that. But this whole world, all this dream, is nothing but thoughts. But he ends that verse by saying, Nindrida Sendrida Ninevida Vindre. Let them stop or let them continue. They're not other than you. That means we should focus, that what Bhagavan implies by that is we shouldn't be concerned about the appearance of this dream. What we should be concerned about is fixing our mind on the underlying reality, which is our own being. So long as our attention is fixed on the underlying reality, let the dreams carry on or let them stop. It's no concern of ours. So we shouldn't be concerned about dreams. We shouldn't be concerned about thoughts. We shouldn't be concerned about anything other than trying to hold on to the underlying reality, which is our own being. I am, the pure, this fundamental awareness I am. That is what we actually are. So if we want to be free of the unreal, we need to hold on to the real. So long as we hold on to the real, the unreal will drop off of its own accord.
I was just going to ask you, I mean, this is something which came up last time as well, in the context of what Bhagavan said, that, of course, we should not identify with our dream, whether it's the waking dream or the sleeping dream. We mustn't identify. And for the Jnani, of course, the Jnani knows that this is a dream. Or whatever, you know, I mean, that there is no reality to this. It's not really real. It's not an objective world out there which has a grip on the Jnani. It does not. It's like bubbles or whatever it might be. Howsoever, it appears very ephemeral. But simply in terms, but because most of us are still at the level of conventional reality, we haven't yet reached the ultimate. There is this question that, yes, we must always sort of base ourselves in the ultimate and ground ourselves there as much as we can, turn our attention there. However, where the convention is concerned, whether it's, for example, there can be a dream which sometimes has something which points us in the direction of truth, or which is something which is virtuous. And I believe that even Jnanis, I mean, insofar as, you know, the body hasn't dropped, you know, sort of the waking world kind of continues for them. They just don't see it as real in the same way. They may have dreams as well. They simply sort of do not, it doesn't have that grip on them. I mean, we get very excited, at least I get very excited with my dreams, so to speak. So would it be all right to say that, yes, so of course we need to turn our attention to that, but that does not necessarily mean that we, you know, that sort of our conventional everyday reality, you know, sort of the ethics of that, you know, the way to become virtuous and so on, to be virtuous, all that does matter. Because I always have a problem with Advaita Vedanta in this, and this is a problem in the Indian context that, oh, no, we're all just enlightened, everything is non-dual, and we go to that. But, you know, but there is a path, there is an ethical path.
We shouldn't mix up different levels of reality, so to speak. Actually, there are no levels of reality. There's only one reality. But so long as we're in this state, so long as we take ourselves to be a body, this world seems to be real. What is actually real is only our own being. But because we identify our being with this body seems to be ourself. Therefore, this body seems to be real. And since this body is a part of this world, the whole world seems to be real. So we obviously, in this world, we have to behave in an appropriate manner. Because who is behaving? It is not what we actually are that is behaving. It's only this person that we take ourselves to be. So this person we take ourselves to be is a part of the dream, so it should act in an appropriate manner in the dream. So Yes, outwardly we do. Of course, we need to behave in an ethical manner. If we behave, all unethical behavior is rooted in selfishness, and selfishness is rooted in ego. Why I care only about me and not anyone else? Because I take this me to be this person. So the hell with everyone else. So long as I'm okay, doesn't matter about anyone else. That's a state of selfishness. In the spiritual path, we are trying to move away from this selfishness. We move away from this selfishness by recognizing that what we are is not this limited person that we take ourselves to be. So as we go deeper in this spiritual path, as it becomes clearer and clearer to us, but what we actually are is not this person we take ourselves to be, the selfishness naturally drops off. So the whole spiritual path, from the very beginning to the very end, is nothing but a move away from selfishness. Selfishness means that selfishness arises when we limit ourselves as just one person. So as we go deeper in this spiritual path, the selfishness drops off, and ethical behavior thereby becomes natural to us. We behave ethically not because we want some reward, not because we want to go to heaven. If I behave properly, then I'll go to heaven. If I behave badly, I'll go to hell. If we have that sort of attitude, even that is a selfishness. Because for whom do we want heaven? For me. Who wants to avoid hell? I want to avoid hell. So even that is selfish. We need to move away from that selfishness. The selfishness, we naturally move away from it as we go deeper in this spiritual path. So for a spiritual person isn't good because being good will earn some reward in heaven or whatever. We are good just because it is a natural thing to do. That is the being evil, being bad, doing immoral things is not natural. It arises out of this unnatural state of selfishness, which is rooted in ego. So the stronger our identification with this person we take ourselves to be, the stronger the selfishness will be. As we slowly begin to separate ourselves from this person we seem to be, our mind is purified, and we see that is for a person with a very impure mind, they will not mind seeing others suffer. Even people who take pleasure in seeing others suffer, because their mind is so blinded by their selfishness and resulting desires and attachments and everything. But as the mind is purified, we find it more and more unbearable to see the suffering of others, because we see ourselves in others. When we see someone suffering, it's painful for us to see. In fact, often it is more painful to see others suffering than to be suffering ourselves. So this ethical behavior, righteousness, dharma, this will naturally comes as we progress in this spiritual path.
Thank you, Michael. That was very nicely put.
And that is so clearly exemplified in the case of Bhagavan. Bhagavan had completely that Bhagavan was beyond all these things, but insofar as we see Bhagavan as a person, he was the kindest, gentlest, and his love was equal to all. He had equal love both for the good people and the bad people, because Bhagavan doesn't see us as the person we take ourselves to be. He sees us as himself, which is what we really are. So he had equal love for all, for all people in human form and people in all forms. Bhagavan had equal love for all types of creatures.
Yes, I remember there was a quotation that at one point Bhagavan said that ahimsa is the first code of behavior of a yogi. And I think that these things are quite important because for most of
Yes,
us who are simply moving on the path, and for everybody
yes,
going toward the path, it's very important to have certain guidelines, certain posts
yeah,
which help us to become more selfless and not to go wrong.
yeah,
Otherwise,
yeah,
because ego is such a tricky business
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
it comes in. And
At first, we need to be told, behave yourself. But later on, as we progress in this path, it becomes natural for us to behave ourselves, not to cause harm to anyone. That is, ahimsa is actually natural. That is, ahimsa means non-harming. Harm, any harm that is we do to others, we are doing to ourselves. So it becomes, as we see this more and more clearly, it becomes more and more natural for us not to harm anything.
thank you very much, Michael. Let's move on
But
to
in the very early stages, not only are we told you have to not cause harm, you have to be good, you shouldn't kill, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't do this or that. We also have to be threatened. If you behave badly, you go to hell. If you behave well, you go to heaven. So this reward and punishment is there at first. Then later on, this reward and punishment becomes irrelevant because we know we should always try to be good. But later on, we don't even have to try to be good. It just will be natural for us to be good. So we don't even have to be told that you should be good. We just naturally, it just comes naturally to the extent to which ego subsides.
well, I hope we will all reach there.
Well, by Bhagwan's grace, we will.
We will. We will.
And by his grace, we are hopefully moving in the right direction.
The next question is regarding grace, can one pray directly to Atma Brahma or Sachidanand or the heart for grace to see one's true self? I often feel that if I do that, I can find inspiration for Atma-vichara.
Yes, yes, certainly. That is Bhagavan in Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam. Bhagavan, if we pay close attention to what Bhagavan is saying, he's often referring to that is he never hides the fact that what Aruṇācala actually is that which is shiny in our heart as eye. For example, in the verse 5 of Aruṇācala Navamaṇimālai, Bhagavan sings, Sirana Sonagiri, Sirakavaram, Chitsarupanam Ire. He's referring to Aruṇācala as the Lord who is Chitsvarupa, whose real nature is Chit, but he's shining gloriously in the form of this sublime Sonagiri, this sublime Aruṇācala. So Bhagavan is repeatedly that is he's what is appearing outwardly in the form of a hill is what is actually ever shining in our heart as eye. And he says it in so many ways. I mean, he makes this clear in so many ways in throughout Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam. He ends the final verse of Aruṇācala Patikam. Oh no, sorry. It's the previous verse. He ends it. In the previous verse he describes how the thought of Aruṇācala will subdue the cheste, the activity of the mind, draw the mind within to face itself, make the mind motionless like itself, and then feed upon the mind. And he ends by saying, Ortumin wekal, be saved souls by thinking of this this Weakoli Arunamagiriye, this great Aruna hill, the killer of the soul, who Ulam Adin Olirib, who shines within the heart. So he's constantly referring to the outward form of Aruṇācala, but reminding us that that is always shining in our heart. So when we are praying to Aruṇācala, we're not just praying to an external form, we are essentially praying to Aruṇācala, who's ever shining in our heart, as our own reality, as our own being. So the more we direct our prayers inwards, the more it naturally draws us to this path of self-investigation. When we talk to someone, we like to see that person. When we talk to someone, we're not constantly averting our eyes. We look at the person. So when we talk to Aruṇācala, we look at Aruṇācala, and Aruṇācala is ever shining in our heart as eye. So the natural way of praying to Aruṇācala is to face inwards and pray to Aruṇācala, as Bhagavan makes clear in so many ways in Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam, these 5 hymns to Aruṇācala. The very first verse of Aksharamlai, Aruṇācala mena ahameinine pava ahate verarupai Aruṇācala. That ahame has a double meaning. One meaning is only I. So one meaning is you root out the egos of those who think that Aruṇācala alone is I. Those who, in other words, those who understand that Aruṇācala alone is I, that when we talk about Aruṇācala, we're talking about I. Those who understand that, you root out their ego. Ahame also means in the heart. So when we think of Aruṇācala, we're not to think of Aruṇācala outwardly, we're to think of Aruṇācala in the heart, where he's ever shining as our own being.
Michael, this question, I just noticed, the person who wrote the question, there was another question in between, and then he explained.
Okay.
It's just, I think it's been answered, but so he says, in other words, what is the role of mystical love and prayer in the context of Atma-vichara?
Aksharamlai. You read Aruṇācala, well, Aksharamlai in particular, but all these 5 hymns, if you read, then it is very, very clear. Bhagavan is, in the form of hymns of praise and prayers, Bhagavan is talking only about Atma-vichara from beginning to end of Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam. Why do we pray? Because we lack sufficient love to turn within. So we pray to Aruṇācala to help us turn within. But in order for our prayer to be sincere, while praying, we should be trying to turn within. There's no point in constantly rushing outwards and saying, oh, Aruṇācala, help me to turn within. We should be trying to turn within. So prayer is a part of the process of turning within.
Well, the next question is the swallowing light. So this is in quotation marks. The swallowing light, the pure awareness, as you put it, seems to point to the same element that the Bible represents when talking about an all-consuming fire. At the core, all these teachings point to the one.
Yes, yes. I'm not familiar with that particular portion of the Bible, but ultimately, if there's truth in any, that is, truth is one. The truth is what is shining in our heart as I. So that is the ultimate truth of any scripture that is really a scripture. That is, there's some, I think somewhere in Guru Vachakakavai, if I remember correctly, Bhagavan says this is the heart of all religions, and that religions have a life of vitality only to the extent to which they connect us to this inner core.
The next question is, when I'm not at peace, I need the ego to remind me to turn to the self. Should I not rely on the ego there also? What is Bhagwan's function here?
Who is to turn towards the self? It is only ego. That is, ego has to turn. That is, the nature of ego is to be constantly going outwards, to be constantly attending to things other than itself. Atma-vichara is that same ego whose nature is going outwards. That same ego is turning its attention back within. So without ego, there can be no Atma-vichara, because the one who is that is what we actually are, our real nature, doesn't need to investigate itself, because it knows itself just by being itself. When we rise as ego, we don't cease to be what we actually are, but we seem to be something other than what we actually are. So in order to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to turn our attention back to ourselves. So it's we as ego who need to turn our attention back to ourselves. So it's not that we need ego for Atma-vichara. As ego, we need Atma-vichara, because Atma-vichara is the only way in which we can cease rising as ego and remain as we actually are. And in verse 27 of Ulladu, which I referred to earlier, where Bhagavan says, the state in which I is without rising is the state in which we are that. Then in the next sentence he says, how to attain the annihilation of oneself in which ego does not rise, except by investigating the place where I rises. The place where I rises means our own being. So without investigating our being, we cannot cease rising as ego. Of course, we cease rising as ego every night when we fall asleep, but that's only temporary. We rise again. But if we want to permanently cease rising as ego, if we want to attain the annihilation of ourselves, as he says in that verse, in other words, the permanent non-rising of ego, we need to investigate ourselves, the source from which we've risen, our own reality, what we actually are. That means we need to direct our attention back within. Ego, the food on which ego lives and flourishes, is the outward going attention. That is, attending to things other than ourselves feeds and nourishes ourselves as ego. Turning our attention back within dissolves ego back into its source. This is the great revelation of Bhagavan. Bhagavan has made clearer than it has ever been made clear in any of the scriptures of the world, but this is the nature of ego. This is what he makes so clear in verse 25 of Ulladu. We cannot rise or stand as ego without grasping form. Now, grasping form means attending to things other than ourselves. And attending to things other than ourselves is the very food on which we as ego survive and flourish. So the only way to put an end to this rising of ego is to seek our own reality, to turn within. If we turn within, seeking to know who am I, seeking to know what I actually am, Tedinal otum pidikam, as Bhagavan says in that verse. If seeking it takes flight, so if ego seeks its own reality, it thereby ceases to be ego. It is swallowed by the light of pure awareness, which is its own reality.
Well, the next question is, Michael, you often say that Bhagavan talked about Ichcha Kriya Svatantra. Where exactly does Bhagavan talk about this idea or term? Thank you.
Well, this is one of the things that hasn't been well recorded anywhere. But for example, in talks and day by day and things, we see occasional references to free will. But in fact, in Tamil, there's no exact equivalent of free will. The term Bhagavan used was Ichcha Kriya Svatantra. Ichcha Kriya Svatantra means freedom or independence. Ichcha means will, Kriya means action. So we have freedom of will and action. Whereas the English term free will is a very imprecise term, because if we talk about free will, what are we talking about? Are we talking about will, or are we talking about the freedom of the will? That is, there are many people who deny that there's any such thing as free will. But we cannot deny the fact that we have a will. We all have likes, dislikes, desires, attachments. This is our will. The question is, do we have freedom of will? Bhagavan very clearly says, yes, we do have freedom, because the nature of the will, that is, the will manifests in the form of likes, dislikes, desires, and attachments. But the seeds that give rise to all of these are what are called vasanas. Vasanas are the inclinations. But we are not bound by our inclinations. Sometimes we may be inclined to do something. We may be inclined to speak some harsh words to someone. But we have the freedom. When that inclination to say something harsh, something unkind rises in us, we have the freedom. Do we allow ourselves to say those unkind words, or do we restrain ourselves? Because along with that inclination, we also may have an inclination to not to hurt someone. So though that person may have done wrong, we don't want to hurt their feelings. So we try and put it in a gentle way. So as Bhagavan said, vasanas are rising in constant numbers, like ocean waves. They're constantly rising in our mind. All mental activity is nothing but a play of vasanas. But all types of vasanas are in our mind. We are the ones who choose which vasanas we follow. So that's where our freedom lies. And freedom of, when we follow any particular vasana, that is allowing that is Vishaya vasanas, or what the inclinations to attend to things other than ourselves. Attending to anything other than ourselves is a mental activity. It's thinking. So mental activity leads to activity of speech and body. So all actions, the root of all actions is the vasanas. As Bhagavan says in the second verse of Upadesha the fruit of actions will pass away. That is, when you experience the fruit of any action, it's thereby finished. But what remains of the seeds, those seeds, he makes it clear, are vasanas. So the vasanas are what prompt us to do the same action again and again. So we experience the fruit of the action we've done in the past, but if the seed remains, we'll be doing the same action again and again, so long as we allow ourselves to be swayed by that vasana. If we don't want to, but we have the freedom either to be swayed by that or not swayed by that, that is where our freedom lies. So freedom of will and action is, that is our real nature. What we actually are is infinitely free, because there's nothing other than ourselves to limit our freedom. When we rise as ego, we limit ourselves. So we limit our freedom, but we don't completely, the freedom is just like our being. It's our very nature. So we cannot, though we can, when we rise as ego, our being seems to be limited to this form. And so it's limited, as this body, we're limited in time, we're limited in space, and we're limited in the sense that we're distinct from every other form. So we impose all these limitations on ourselves. So our being is limited. Our awareness is limited. We know this, we don't know that. Our happiness is limited. We have a little happiness here and a little bit misery there. And our freedom is likewise limited. But though we have limited freedom, we always have freedom. And we have to use that freedom to regain our original freedom. We can regain our original freedom only by ceasing to rise as ego. That is why we need love to turn within. What is bhakti? Bhakti is love. That is will. If we have no freedom of will, then bhakti becomes meaningless. We have the freedom to like to go outwards or the freedom to like to go back within. Which freedom are we going to, which are we going to, we have two options, either to go out or to go in. Which do we want to choose? We have that freedom to choose that. Unfortunately, most of Bhagavan's oral teachings were recorded not in Tamil but in English. So the Ichya Kriya Swatantra, they use the closest English equivalent, free will. But free will is not an adequate translation of Ichya Kriya Swatantra. Ichya Kriya Swatantra means freedom of will and action. Sometimes when Bhagavan analyzed it a bit deeper, he would talk about Ichya Swatantra and Kriya Swatantra to explain the difference, but they go hand in hand. So generally he talked about Ichya Kriya Swatantra.
The next question is, what is Bhagwan's answer to suffering? For example, if someone is dying of terminal cancer, how does Indian philosophy and religion make sense of suffering more adequately than Western philosophy and Christianity? Thank you.
There's one simple word that makes sense of it all: samsara. Samsara, as Bhagavan said, is nothing but ego. When we rise as ego, the nature of ego is to be embodied. That is, as soon as we rise as ego, we take ourselves to be a body. And the embodied state is a state of suffering. That is, we are born, we die, we are susceptible to so many diseases, we're susceptible to accidents. We suffer bereavement when our near and dear ones pass away. We suffer in so many ways. So suffering is inevitable so long as we rise as ego, because our real nature is infinite happiness. But when we rise as ego, we limit ourselves, and thereby just like we limit our freedom, we also limit our happiness. So a state of limited happiness can never satisfy us. Because our real nature is infinite happiness, we cannot be satisfied by anything less than infinite happiness. So rising as ego is itself dukkha, it is self-dissatisfaction, misery. So to think that we can have like most religions have a concept of heaven. Some world in which we live with, free of all troubles, free of hunger and thirst and everything. But in practice, so long as we're embodied, even if we're living in the most blissful heaven of all, we'll still be dissatisfied, because even the most blissful heaven conceivable is something less than the infinite happiness that is our own real nature. So we will still be craving something more, even when we're in that very blissful heaven. So the state of supreme happiness is the state in which we do not rise as ego, the state in which we do not limit ourselves, the state in which we remain as the infinite Satchits, infinite being awareness that we actually are. That alone is infinite happiness. Nothing less than that will satisfy us. And then, of course, that's the basic thing that we need to understand, that is this word samsara that is used in not just in Hinduism, all Indian, that is all of the dharmic religions. That is what is nowadays called Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism. These are nowadays taken as different religions, but actually they're all one family of religions. They all have this concept of samsara. That is, they all have this idea that the state of embodiment is unsatisfactory. We will never be satisfied with this state of embodiment. So the aim of all these religions is moksha or nirvana or whatever you call it. They have different names, kaivalya, whatever. It's got different names, but it is a state where we're free of samsara. That means free of embodied existence, free of ego, in other words. Once we rise as ego, under the sway of our vasanas, we do actions. And in Christianity, because the question referred to Christianity, in Christianity, somewhere in the Bible, in the New Testament, I can't remember whether it's Jesus who said this or it's in one of the epistles or where it is, but somewhere it is said, as you sow, so you shall reap. If that principle is true, but as you sow, so you shall reap, the flip side of the same principle is as you reap, so you have sown. So that is the seed of what is called the law of karma in Indian philosophy. All forms of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, all accept this doctrine of karma. They may have slightly different understandings of karma, but the basic principle is, as you sow, so you shall reap. And as you reap, so you have sown. So this karma, that is when I talked about samsara, this rising as ego and thereby being embodied is a state of dissatisfaction. But within this state of samsara, there's relatively comfortable states and relatively uncomfortable states. So we at times in our life, we are placed in fairly comfortable circumstances. We don't have much difficulty. Other times we may have to face disease, we may have to face famine, we may have to face warfare, all types of things. So why is it that some people suffer more and some people seem to suffer more and some people seem to suffer less? That is explained by the law of karma. If someone suffers, it's because of what they've done in the past. If what we do now is what we're going to experience in the future. When the thieves broke into Ramana Ashram, this is about 1926, when the ashram was just a few small thatched huts. But the thieves had an idea that it must be a rich mutt, they must be getting lots of donations, they must be having lots of money hoarded away somewhere. So when the thieves came, Bhagavan said to them, we don't have any money here. The only valuables we've got some cooking pots in the kitchen. You can take away the cooking pots if you want, but we've got nothing else of any value to you. The thieves were not satisfied. They thought these people must be hiding money somewhere. So they asked them all to come out of the old hall. And in those days, I'm not even sure, but it was the brickwork construction that was built, or whether it was still only a thatched hut. But anyway, as they were coming out, the thieves were beating them. So Bhagavan also got some beatings with some stick. He got a beating on his thigh. After some days, the police caught the suspects, and they brought the suspects to the ashram, and they asked Bhagavan to identify which of the thieves had beaten him. Bhagavan said, find out the one whom I have beaten. He is the one who has beaten me. That means anything we've experienced, if anyone gives us any trouble, it's because we gave trouble to that person in the past. So if a thief has beaten Bhagavan, it's because he would have beaten him in some previous life. That's all the teaching Bhagavan is giving us there. So the law of karma explains why some people seem to be in better position. Some people are born in a rich family. They seem to have everything easy in life. That doesn't mean they're happy, because often the rich people are, however much wealth they have, there are I believe 3 people in America who have a total wealth of more than $900 billion. And none of them are satisfied with their wealth. The one who is the richest of all of them, he's now trying to destroy the whole government, but he's providing benefits for poor people. In other words, he's not satisfied with what he wants. He wants to get more and more and more wealth. Material things can never satisfy us. But what an unhappy person he must be when he has all that wealth, but he's still not satisfied. He still wants more power, more wealth. This is nothing can satisfy us other than the infinite happiness that is our own real nature. So people may seem to have all the good things in life, but they're sowing the seeds for a lot of suffering for themselves in future. Because whatever you do that harms others, that harm will come back to you. As you sow, so you shall reap. So the idea is that the law of karma is there in seed form in Christianity. It's just never been properly developed.
So what you were saying about the richest man in the world wanting more and more wealth and power and more children, let's not forget. So the next question
But he's
is,
not happy with his own children because one of them has become, he's very upset because one of his male children has opted to become female.
the next question is, this is a question about what was said at the start of the meeting about dreams. And the question is it not easier to perceive the underlying reality when the mind is less busy or when there are less thoughts? Isn't that a sign that we are attending to ourselves when the mind quietens down?
Yes and no. That is, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent the mind will subside. But we can't say that the opposite. Merely by stopping thoughts, we don't see ourselves as we actually are. This is the big difference between yoga and Vedanta and Advaita. As Bhagavan said, yoga is not practical because if you try to, the aim of yoga is yoga's chitta vritti nirodha. The aim of yoga is to stop the mental activity. But Bhagavan said, merely stopping mental activity can at best result in manolaya, in a temporary subsidence of the mind. That's what essentially what Kevala Nivikalpa Samadhi is. It's a state of manolaya. But what, as Bhagavan says in verse 13 of Upadesha Undiyā, dissolution of mind is of two kinds, laya and nasa. What is in laya will rise again. What is in nasa will not rise again. So our aim is not laya, but nasa. So merely stopping the thoughts, the most you can achieve is laya. In order to achieve nasa, you need to know what you actually are. And you cannot know what you actually are merely by stopping thoughts. Every night when we fall asleep, we stop thoughts, but we don't thereby, ego isn't thereby annihilated. So to know what we actually are, we as ego need to turn our attention back within. To the extent to which we turn our attention back within, we thereby subside. When we subside, the thoughts will also subside along with us. So in the path of Atma-vichara, stopping thoughts is not the aim. Stopping thoughts is a byproduct, but it is not the aim. The aim of Atma-vichara is to know who am I, to know what we actually are. And we can know what we actually are only by attending to ourselves. So the aim of yoga is achieved by Atma-vichara, but the aim of Atma-vichara is not achieved by yoga. So we shouldn't take stopping thoughts to be our aim, because then our attention is on the thoughts. We're concerned about the thoughts. We shouldn't be concerned about thoughts. Nindrida sendrida nina vidavindre, as Bhagavan says as I said, referred earlier in the 6th verse of Aruṇācala. Let them stop or let them continue. They're not apart from you. Not apart from you means they're not apart from that fundamental being, which is what we actually are. So we should hold on to the being, hold on to what is real, let the unreal take care of itself. Let it continue or let it not continue. It's no concern of ours. All we should be concerned about is holding on to our being. Who am I?
Just a quick query, Michael. to be able to attend to oneself sort of one-pointedly as much as one can is often very difficult for people because the attention tends to be in those of us who are, say, perhaps sort of more beginners on the path. Sort of the faculty of attention, its ability to continuously attend is not that great, and it takes time. And it was my understanding that the purpose of mantra japa, even and various kinds of yogic exercises, prayer, all these practices is also to help us to gain a certain control, a certain one-pointedness of attention, which can then be focused increasingly on truth, on reality, on what we are.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to.
Well, yes, all these other paths, they're all indirect ways. That is, but ultimately, as Bhagavan made clear, whatever other path you follow, ultimately you have to come to this path, because the final aim is to know what we actually are. We can know what we actually are only by attending to ourselves. So, but once we've come to this path, if we're drawn to this path of Atma-vichara, all these other practices are not necessary, because we may not be very good at practicing Atma-vichara, but as Bhagavan said, even a little effort made in this path is worth any amount of effort made in other paths, because this is the direct path. This is leading us directly back to our goal. So we should, even if we can achieve only a moment of self-attention here and there, we should treasure every moment of self-attention. If we don't recognize this, we'll easily get disheartened. Oh, I'm not able to do this. Every time I turn my attention back to myself, it again comes out. Yes, of course it again comes out. That is the very nature of ego. But we have to continue trying. The more we continue trying, as Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nana, Ipati Paraka Mana Tuku Tampirapitil Tangi Nikam Shakti Adikadikindradu. By practicing and practicing in this manner, for the mind, the strength to remain subsided in its source will increase. Practicing this manner means whenever our attention goes out, turning it back to ourselves. To whom do all these external things appear? To me. Who am I? We turn our attention constantly back towards ourselves and try to. Investigating to whom means turning our attention away from whatever appears back towards ourselves, the one to whom it appears. Then we need to hold on to ourselves. That is investigating who am I. And when we investigate who am I, as Bhagavan said, the mind will return to its birthplace and its source, and the thought that had risen will also subside. So the thoughts will definitely subside if we're following this path, but we shouldn't take that, we shouldn't even notice whether the thoughts have subsided or not. Because if we notice either the presence or the absence of thoughts, even the absence of thoughts is a thought. When we are sleeping, there are no thoughts. But are we aware of the absence of thoughts? No, we are just aware of our own being. It's only when we wake up from sleep and we say, oh, I wasn't aware of anything. I didn't have any thoughts. So it's only from the perspective of the mind in waking and dream that we talk of states with thoughts or without thoughts. But the real state is beyond both the presence and absence of thoughts.
The next question says it's a personal question to Michael. If you wish to share, how far is your progress in sadhana, please? And what level of impact has it created in your daily life with regard to worldly problems, intention? The intention here is just to gain more inspiration. Thank you.
Okay, well, you'll have to ask Bhagavan that. You'll probably get a very disappointing answer. You know, I expect I would get very low marks from Bhagavan, let's say, but I'm trying. We can't measure our own progress. All we can, when Bhagavan was asked about this, how do we know whether we're progressing or not? Bhagavan said the only sign of progress is perseverance. So long as we're continuing persevering, because so long as we continue trying to turn our attention within, we are making progress. But who is making progress? The one who's making progress is ego. So we shouldn't even be concerned about this progress, because progress is only for ego. We are not investigating whether we're progressing or not. We are investigating our being. Who am I? Am means our being. It's our being we're investigating. Our being is eternal. So let's not worry about progress. Let moksha come or not come. It doesn't concern us. Who am I here and now? But the other part of the question, if we are following this path, we will find no, that is our desires and everything. They continue. They will be getting weaker, but they still seem to be very strong. But somehow, what is perceptible is a kind of detachment. Even that is, desire is the very nature of ego. So long as we rise as ego, the vasanas are going to be there, the desires are going to be there. They may be stronger, they may be less strong. Of course, as we progress in this path, they get less strong. But they will continue so long as we're there. But somehow, as we follow this path more and more, there'll be more and more indifference to all these things. Yes, okay, I still have desires, I still have vasanas, all these things. But none of these, this is the nature of ego. But what we are trying to find is the underlying reality of ego, what we actually are. And what we actually are is ever untouched by all these vasanas and desires and all these things. So we constantly need to be shifting our attention away from all these external concerns about some future state called moksha, concerns about progress, concerns about thoughts, concerns about desires and vasanas. The only way to deal with all these things is to turn within more and more. So being not concerned with these things is the way to deal with them. And we can be not concerned with these things only by being concerned only to know who am I.
The next question is an interesting one, but there is something which I think needs to be I think it needs to be split, and something which we should address in different ways. So the question is, does Ramana ever talk about Arjuna's role in civil war or of cases of violence in the Upanishad? And these are actually really have to be taken as two separate questions in my view. Says, Arjuna is going to kill his friends and relatives as a tool of God's will. But actually, it says as a part of Prakriti, which is really not God's will. This is the way of, I can say nature, but the way of life, of collective life and so on. That's really appropriate there. And then the second quotation he has is from the Brihad Aranyak Upanishad, the 6.4.7, and I just looked this up because I wasn't familiar with this particular verse. And this is to do with a woman and having sex with a woman. I think this is all part of, the sort of sacrificial rituals and so on, because the Vedas are not as Victorian as current day Indians. So so everything kind of, I think people often not. So the quotation is, if she is not willing, he should buy her over. I think the way it starts is, if, however, he sees So that surely a woman who has changed her clothes at the end of her menstrual period is the most auspicious of women. When she has changed her clothes at the end of her menstrual period, therefore one should approach that splendid woman and invite her to have sex. It's in a part of this sort of ritual context. Should she refuse to consent, he should bribe her. If she still refuses, he should beat her with a stick or with his fist and overpower her, saying, I take away the splendor from you with my virility and splendor, and she is sure to become bereft of splendor. If, on the other hand, she accedes to his wish, he should say, I confer splendor on you with my virility and splendor. And then they are both sure to become full of splendor. And so this is all a part of something, a thing. And the question addresses that. Before I answer, because these are things which I've sort of worked on, and I would just wish to say to people, please remember that all these old Indian texts have been, they've been collated, they're oral traditions, people have added, taken away according to the times, and we are dealing with a patriarchy. So please, and I don't think in that sense, all references to violence are exactly the same, but yeah, are the same. And I don't think that Bhagwan would approve of something like this. There's a very, and this is why I think it's so important
Yes.
to be able to also look at these texts, Anyway,
Yeah.
I will pass it over to you, Michael.
Yeah. Well, the Vedas have all sorts of things. We should take what is useful and leave the rest. There's just yesterday, someone asked me a question. I referred to a passage in Maharshi's Gospel where someone is asking Bhagavan about all these theories of creation that are there in the Vedas. If creation is unreal, then why does it describe creation in so many ways? And Bhagavan said something to the effect that if it were real, it would describe it in one way. I don't know whether he says that there. But anyway, the final bit, Bhagavan says, he says, adopt in practice what you accept in theory. If other things, just take it as artavada, as auxiliary arguments. So we don't have to worry about things that make no sense to us. What does make sense of us, let us try to put that into practice. I have not read the Upanishads. I've read parts of the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. I'm aware of some of the ideas there. There's some very, very deep ideas. I had no idea that there was such a thing. But generally, the Upanishads are actually very critical of the ritual. The rituals that are dealt with in the other parts of the Upanishad. Many of the Upanishads very strongly condemn the rituals. Sometimes they talk about the rituals and provide an allegorical meaning for the rituals. The inner, they give a inner significance of these rituals, what the rituals actually are pointing at, not the actual ritual, but what it implies. This particular passage, I have no idea what is the context in which this comes or anything about it, and I've never heard Bhagavan referring to anything like that. I don't think Bhagavan was obviously familiar with certain passages of the Upanishads, because he used to sometimes refer to them, but I don't think Bhagavan had ever systematically read the whole Upanishad. Sometimes very learned people would come and ask him questions about passages, and he could explain them very well. Whether anyone asked him about this particular passage, I have no idea. But no, I don't think Bhagavan would. I don't know how Bhagavan would explain that, but I don't think he definitely wouldn't say yes. That is what you should do. That Bhagavan would not condone that. Regarding Arjuna, Bhagavan often referred to the Bhagavad Gita. He selected 42 verses and translated them into Tamil, which are the Bhagavad Gita Saram, the essence of Bhagavad Gita. So that is the whole story of the Mahabharata, and the context in which Bhagavad Gita was given was actually a very suitable context for these teachings, for Krishna to give these teachings. And Bhagavad Gita contains something for everyone. There's the very deepest Advaita philosophy there, and there's all sorts of other teachings are there. There's teachings on how Arjuna's a prince, so there's a certain way, princes have a certain dharma, how they should behave, because there's a responsibility. If you're a prince, you're there to protect your people, to take care of the welfare of your people, to defend if the people are under attack and so on. So Krishna is teaching him there how what is the dharma of a prince, and how and he talks about swadharma. We all have our dharma according to the different roles we have in life. We have so many different. Nobody has just one role. We have different roles. In the workplace, we've got a certain role. We are working under someone who is our boss, and we are maybe have other people who are working under us. So we've got different roles. Within the family, we've got different roles. We are a child to our parents. We're a husband or wife to our spouse. We are a parent to our children, and so on and so forth. There's so many different roles we have, and we have to play each role appropriately. So Arjuna was in a certain situation as a prince. He had a certain duty, and Krishna made it clear. And Krishna, regarding warfare had been there since the beginning of, I mean, people have been fighting among themselves in so many ways since the beginning of time. And it's not only humans who fight among themselves. We see other species are fighting among themselves. So this is all part of the problem of samsara. When we have samsara, we have an embodied state. We have, and people who are embodied, they have selfishness and greed and everything. And so it leads to conflict. And sometimes it's necessary to fight for what is right, to defend the innocent against the wrongdoers, and so on and so forth. So that's a big subject. Bhagavan didn't generally go into that, but he often explained, as far as for example, the Deva-Asura Yuddha, the fights between the Devas and the Asuras in the Puranas and in the Ityasas and so on. Bhagavan explained the tattva of these things. He said all these different battles, the battle between good and evil, this is all an allegory for the battle that is going on in the heart of every spiritual aspirant, the battle between our satvasana and all the vishaya vasanas. Superficially, it's between the subha and the asubha vasanas, the good vasanas and the bad vasanas. So we should, at the early stages of spiritual path, we try to be a good person, to cultivate good qualities and good behaviors and so on and so forth, and to give up all the bad qualities and bad behaviors and so on. We try to, but as we go deeper in the spiritual path, even the subhavasanas are they're subhavasanas obviously better than asubhavasanas, but they're all vishaya vasanas. Ultimately, the only good vasana is the satvasana, the love to turn back within. So it all comes back to that all these stories are representing this battle between good and evil that's going on in our own heart, which, as I say, is superficially it's a battle between the good vasanas and the bad vasanas, but ultimately it's a battle between the sat vasana and all other vasanas, which are all vishaya vasanas. So that's the deeper significance of all these things, and Bhagavan made that clear in Guru Vachaka Kavai. There's a verse in which he says that all these stories about these battles between the Devas and the Asuras, it's all representing the battle that is going on in the heart of every spiritual aspirant, between the love to turn within and the desire to go outwards.
The next question is about prarabdha. And it is, prarabdha cannot be changed, but is it possible for prarabdha to get softened through grace? For example, if prarabdha is to lose a leg with grace, would it be possible to lose a foot instead of the whole leg? Thank you.
Prarabdha is ever soft. Prarabdha is the sweet will of the Lord. If we are following the path of surrender, it doesn't matter what prarabdha throws at us, it is all the sweet will of Bhagavan. So it need not be softened anymore. If Bhagavan gives us troubles to experience, that is only for our own good. So if we are on this, or if we are on the path of surrender, there's no such thing as a bad prarabdha. Whatever prarabdha, that is, Bhagavan sometimes said, whether you call it prarabdha or call it the will of God, it's the same thing. Because the prarabdha, it's the fruit of our past actions, but selected and allotted to us by the grace of God. So whatever we experience as prarabdha is nothing but the grace of God. If we view it as such, what does it matter whether you lose a foot or a leg? Whatever it is, it's all his sweet will. As he says as Bhagavan says in Aruṇācala Patikam, I think in the second verse, Ninishtam enishtam, your will is my will. Imbadaku, that is happiness for me. So whatever he wills, let him put us in hell. That is a good prarabdha because it's his sweet will. Such should be the attitude on the path of on the path of surrender. And of course, the path of Atma-vichara is the ultimate. It's the culmination of the path of surrender. So we shouldn't be worried about whether we've got a good prarabdha or a bad prarabdha. It's all the sweet will of Bhagavan. And whether we lose a leg or a foot, the whole body we're going to lose one day when death comes. So why worry about all these things?
The next question is, did Bhagwan encourage chanting the mantra of a chosen deity at all? For instance, chanting Arunachala Shiva continuously as a japa.
Bhagavan wasn't opposed to any type of spiritual practice. Bhagavan, often when people came to Bhagavan and said they may tell about their Ishtadeva, about the puja they're doing, about whatever they're doing, Bhagavan would encourage everyone to continue doing what they're doing. If people are dissatisfied and they want to know what further they can do, then Bhagavan will ask them, why do you want to do anything? Know yourself and be as you are. So all these, Bhagavan knew all these different practices are appropriate at different stages of spiritual development. Bhagavan himself, as we all know, had great love for Aruṇācala. He himself sang Aksharammalai, for which the refrain is Aruṇācala Shiva, Aruṇācala Shiva, Aruṇācala Shiva, Aruṇācala. So, and he's when a guru gives a mantra to a disciple, it is the custom for the guru to explain the meaning of each and every syllable or each and every sound of that mantra. And to also explain the fruit of meditating on that mantra. Bhagavan had done exactly the same with the name Aruṇācala. In verse 2 of Śrī Aruṇācala Navamaṇimālai, which we talked about a few months ago, Bhagavan explains the meaning of each syllable. That is Aruna, those three syllables. That means that is Satya Chit Sukham, Satchidananda, and happy. That is being, awareness, happiness. That's one meaning. Jiva Brahmaikya, the oneness of Jiva and Brahman, which is the meaning of Tattvamasi. So he basically, that is Tattvamasi, is those three words represent the oneness of Jiva and Brahman. And that is the meaning of Aruna. And achala means gunam, that what is very firm, what is very solid, what is immutable. In other words, the eternal, ever unchanging reality. And what is the fruit of meditating on this mantra, Aruṇācala? Mukti ninekavaral Aruṇācala munnidavai, he says. This is the Aruṇācala which will give liberation when thought of. So Bhagavan has given us all mantra diksha in the mantra Aruṇācala. So if we want a mantra, but if we want Bhagavan to give us a mantra, he's given it already in the form of Aruṇācala. But Bhagavan, when people came, for example, a Krishna Bhakta who comes to Bhagavan and talks about his bhakti to Krishna, Bhagavan will encourage him in his bhakti to Krishna. He won't say, oh no, don't worship Krishna, worship only Aruṇācala. That would be, obviously Bhagavan doesn't do that, because all these different names and forms, ultimately they're names and forms of the one reality. So Bhagavan always encouraged, if someone was devoted to any particular name or form of God, Bhagavan would encourage them in that devotion. But whatever other path we may follow, ultimately, Bhagavan made it clear, ultimately, the final goal is annihilation of ego. And that can be achieved only by knowing ourselves as we actually are. And to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to investigate ourselves. So this is the ultimate path. It includes all other paths within it. But Bhagavan knew not everyone is yet... that if we are drawn to this path, if we're attracted to this path when we're ready for it, but many people are not attracted to this path at all. So there are other things, but so many other practices that are taught which are suitable to people at different levels of spiritual development. We can see this in Gita. Krishna has taught. There's so many different teachings. He gives the very ultimate practice. Atma samstam mana kritvana kinchitabi chintayat. Fix the mind in self. Do not think of anything else. That is Atma-vichara. But he also talks about so many other yoga practices and bhakti and karma yoga, all these things, everything he's got, there's something for everyone in the Gita. And Bhagavan also, Bhagavan encouraged people to follow whatever they were following. Bhagavan never gave any teachings of his own accord. If people came to him and sought approval for what they were doing, he would encourage them in what they were doing. If they came to him and said, Bhagavan, I've done this and I've done that, I'm not satisfied, what more can I do? Then he will say, you need not do anything, just be as you are. How can I be as I am? Attend to your being, hold on to your being. That is to be as you actually are.
We have 4 questions left, Michael.
Okay.
The next one is actually very much, again, what we were talking about, there being sort of what one might call an everyday reality, a conventional reality, and ultimate. And this says, it says, once self-knowledge dawns and nama-rupa is destroyed, that would mean that if a person has realized Atma, that person would not be able to see computers, trees, dogs, or planets, but only their substance, which is only impersonal Satchidananda. However, how did Bhagwan Sri Ramana speak with people using words and concepts, and at the same time see all Namarupa as false? How does this work?
Bhagavan says, in whose view does Bhagavan see the world and answer people's questions and discuss concepts and so on? It's all in our view, because we see ourselves as a person, we see Bhagavan as a person. But Bhagavan is not the person that he seems to be. He is, what he actually is that Anadi Ananta Akanda Satchidananda, as he describes in verse 27 of, no, 28 of Upadeshundya. If one knows what one's real nature is, then Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless, limitless, infinite. Akhanda means unbroken, undivided. In other words, we are the one indivisible, immutable, ever eternal reality. That is what we actually are. That is what Bhagavan experienced himself as. But we see him as a person. So as a person, he seems to be seeing the same world, and he seems to talk to us and everything. But we need to understand that is his fundamental teaching is, you are not the body, you're not any of the five sheaths. What you actually are is that pure awareness, which is Satchidananda. So we need to understand that it's only in our view that Bhagavan seems to be a person, not in his view. However, because we see ourselves as a person and consequently see him as a person, what is shining through that person that we see him to be is our own reality, which is the infinite ocean of love and clarity. So we see Bhagavan as an embodiment of love and clarity. That's why all his actions were so loving and caring to all, equally loving to the good and to the bad, that he didn't discriminate. He didn't favor any one type of person over another type of person. He didn't favor any species over any other species. His love was equal to all. Because he didn't see all these differences that we are seeing don't exist in his view. In his view, there is only that one infinite Satchidananda, which is his own being.
So just to clarify, Michael, as long as the body of the Jnani is there, and even though, and the Jnani, of course, does not identify with the body or the world, and for that reason is able to behave with equality to all beings and so on, and have the sort of pure ethics without trying, so to speak, that's there. But as long as the body is there, the functioning of the body, its needs and so on will go on as far as the world is concerned. As far as the dream is concerned, the dream will go on, and the body will, and the eyes of the Jnani, so to speak, will see the world, and hence, will behave equally towards all. The body will function. So it's the way it always was, except that the the awareness is now aware of, so knows itself, and so it sees everything equally as simply what it is. But the motions of the body will go on as they always have.
Bhagavan asked in verse in Uludunapadu, in verse 31, Bhagavan asked, who can understand the state of the one who does not see anything other than itself? So we cannot, with our finite minds, we cannot grasp the state of the jnani. That is, if we want to know Bhagavan's state, we have to be in Bhagavan's state. Only Bhagavan can know his state, so we have to be Bhagavan to know his state. To be Bhagavan means we need to be swallowed by him. As he says in verse 21, he ends verse 21, becoming food is seeing. So to know Bhagavan as he actually is, we need to be swallowed by him. When we are swallowed by him, we are nothing other than him. Then only we can understand his state. Until then, we will always see Bhagavan through the colored glasses of the ego that sees itself as a body. So we see Bhagavan as a body. And that body, that person that Bhagavan seems to be, is the very embodiment of love and clarity, which is what Bhagavan actually is. But we can't know that love and clarity as it actually is, so long as we see ourselves as a body. We can know that love and clarity, which is Bhagavan, only by being that.
Thank you, Michael. The next question is, the way, the question is, the way the ego is described appears to point to an entity that is inherently criminal in nature. Its sole impulse and drive appear to be to escape from what is to what isn't, which is where it prefers to live. Therefore, Atma-vichara seems to represent the process by which this criminal acknowledges its criminal past and attempts to atone for that. In the end, it must stop escaping and return back to the source of the original crime. I think Bhagwan mentioned an Indian king who became enlightened and said, "Finally, I have found that scoundrel that has been robbing me all these years."
Yes, that king is Janaka. Bhagavan, I think in Maharshi's Gospel, Bhagavan refers to that. Yes, this ego, Bhagavan also said, ego, when people ask Bhagavan about the Christian doctrine of original sin, Bhagavan said, yes, the original sin is ego. That is ego is the sinner and the original sin, because our rising as ego, by rising as ego, that is ego is the root of all evil. Evil comes into existence only with the rising of ego. So that's why he describes ego as Uruvatra Pei Ahande. Pei means a demon. It's a evil spirit. So yes, Bhagavan made no bones about it. The ego is by its very nature evil, because it separates us from what we actually are, from the infinite happiness that we actually are. So the only suitable punishment, this is the only case where death penalty is definitely justified. That is the only suitable penalty for this ego is the death penalty. But Bhagavan will never kill ego until ego is willing to surrender itself completely. Until we are willing to put our head on the chopping block, he will not cut the root of this ego, the root that is ego.
Two more questions. So the question is, I'm trying to follow Bhagwan's path as much as possible, but I found out that I don't like to turn within. I don't know how to make myself like doing this. I sometimes ask Bhagwan, please help me to turn within and give me love to do so. Is that sufficient?
It is certainly good to ask Bhagavan for the love to turn within. But if our prayer is to be sincere, we also need to try to turn within. There's no use asking Bhagavan to give us the love to turn within when we continue rushing outwards. So it is true, we don't have when we begin to follow this path seriously, the first thing we learn is how little love we have to turn within. But the very fact that we are drawn to Bhagavan, we're drawn to his teachings, means he's already sown the seed of that love. We have to cultivate, we have to nurture that seed by trying to turn within. Yes, that is the honest answer. We don't love to turn within. If we love to turn within, all problems would be solved. The whole problem is we've got so much liking to turn outwards, to rush outwards. That the liking to rush outwards is what is called Vishaya Vasana, the inclination to go towards Vishayas, phenomena. In other words, to be constantly attending to things other than ourselves. And that is the very nature of ego. Ego cannot survive, ego cannot rise, stand, or flourish without constantly grasping form, as he says in verse 25 of Uludunapdu. Grasping form means attending to things other than ourselves. That is the very food on which we as ego live. So we do all lack the love to turn within. We all lack the love, but we can cultivate that love only by trying to turn within. If we didn't have any love to turn within, we wouldn't even ask Bhagavan to give us the love to turn within. So the very fact that we are asking Bhagavan for the love to turn within means we've at least got the seed of that love. We need to cultivate that by nurture that by trying more and more to turn within. The whole problem is our lack of love. That's why Bhagavan said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. It takes all-consuming love to be willing to surrender ourselves. And investigating ourselves is surrendering ourselves. So without that love to subside and to merge back into our being, we cannot follow this path. Or we cannot succeed in this path, but we need to start. We can only start from where we are. So in our present state, we lack the love, but we have some liking to have that love. So let us build on that liking by trying to turn within. And Bhagavan will definitely help us. But our prayers, he will definitely answer our prayers, because we are praying for what he wants to give us. But our prayer has to be sincere. We have to be willing to try to turn within.
We have to coax ourselves so much, because this is a very honest question.
It is, yes, it is. And we should all be honest about this. We are all, any true devotee of Bhagavan will honestly admit, yes, I don't have the love to turn within. But that is what we have to try to cultivate.
One of the things, among the things we try to do when we have the face-to-face satsang is do some chanting, because that helps to, develop a little bit of that love, that bhakti.
Yeah.
Or if one goes to Aruṇācalam, for example,
Yeah.
or even if I just put on the live streaming which is the morning parayan, or the recorded ones, just seeing that has this calming effect, has this beautiful effect, or just looking at a picture of Bhagavan. I remember somebody once
it's nice
told me,
just to watch people going round Bhagavan's shrine, because we can't do it because we're far away, but in our heart we can be doing it.
Yeah. It all makes such a difference. We just do little things to coax ourselves to turn within, to,
Exactly. Krishna says in Gita, sane, slowly. In the same verse in which he says, fix the mind in yourself, do not think of anything else. Atma samstam mana kritva na kinchitapi chintayat. He begins that verse, sane. So we can only succeed in this path little by little, gently, gradually. And Bhagavan, of course, has translated that verse into Tamil.
The last question, and sorry. Let me just, sorry. So the last question, so it's an interesting one in a way. It's that Sri Ramana himself readily admitted that enlightenment didn't turn people into paragons of virtue. So outward behavior does not change at all. Please read this paragraph below. Michael asked Kunjuswami, in the 30 years that you were associated with Sri Ramana from 1920 to 1950, did you ever see him do or say anything that was so bad or so embarrassing that you feel that you couldn't tell anyone or make it public because it would reflect badly on his public image? Kunjuswami thought for a while and said no. Sri Ramana himself readily admitted that enlightenment didn't turn people into paragons of virtue. Like most great masters before him, he said that it was impossible to judge whether someone was enlightened by what he or she did or said. Saintliness does not necessarily go hand in hand with enlightenment, although most people like to think that it should. Sri Ramana was a rare conjunction of saintliness and enlightenment, but many other masters and enlightened beings were not. They were not less enlightened because they didn't conform to the social and ethical mores of their times. They simply had different destinies to fulfill. This is taken from the David Godman website.
Oh, I I don't know about that. I would be very Bhagavan says in Uludunapduana Bandham, there's a verse. Let me just get the verse. Well, I was thinking of this verse 29, in which he, Bandham, brightness and strength of intellect will increase automatically for those who have seen the reality, just like trees shining with all good qualities, such as beauty, as soon as spring arrives on earth. When he says brightness, he means, I think that means the clarity or wisdom. In a state of clarity, that clarity will prevent us doing anything selfish, anything unrighteous. So I definitely, I'm sure there's somewhere where Bhagavan says all these virtues will come automatically along with there's another verse, verse 13 of Uludunapduanabandam, in which he says the destruction of the Dehatma-bhava, that's ego, the false awareness, I am this body, it is itself dhanam, giving, or it is tavam, austerity, velvi, sacrifice, dhanam, dharmam, dharma, righteousness, yoga, bhakti, varnam means space, that we can take as space means the space of pure awareness, or you can also take it as heaven. That alone is the heavenly state where we're free of that Dehatma-bhava. It is the reality, it is peace, it is truth, it is grace, it is silence, it is firmness, death without dying, knowledge, accomplished renunciation, liberation, and happiness. So all these clearly imply everything good comes along with destruction of ego. Because the root of all evil, the root of all unrighteousness, the root of all selfishness, the root of all bad behavior is ego. So virtue, it's inconceivable, but there can be any vice without ego. So I don't know where David Godman got that from, but I do not believe that is reliably recorded.
Michael, Raghu here.
Yes.
So Michael, I've shared you the direct message to the link,
Yeah.
which includes you and the conversation that you had with Kunjaswami. Actually, David also adds another guru named Papaji or something.
Yes.
So he seems to be already married, but then he marries another lady from Europe at the age of 20.
Yes.
And he gets, I mean, he fathers a child as well, where he tells that he doesn't have a mind, it is the self that it does, something like this. So, I mean, more and more explanation are there in that website with the link that I've shared with you. But I want this understanding clearly that people say enlightenment is just a dent in the personality of that person, but it doesn't change anything of their nature.
What it is, vasanakshaya. All the vasanas are destroyed. But why is it vasanakshaya? Because the root of all vasanas is ego. So when ego is destroyed, the vasanas are destroyed. So how can there be any this is, I find this a completely this to me is not reflecting Bhagavan's teachings at all. All good quality. That is, we can't always judge the actions of jnanis. Take Krishna, for example. Krishna did so many things that superficially are against Dharma. But because he's Krishna, whatever he did is what is right. It was what was appropriate according to the circumstances, because there's no, we can't, what may be Dharma, what may be adharma under one circumstance, it can be Dharma under another circumstance. So, but because he's Krishna, whatever he did, that is the right thing to do according to the circumstances. So but people who claim to be enlightened and then behave in all sorts of inappropriate ways and use their supposed enlightenment as an excuse, they are just cheating people. That is totally unacceptable. Why should we believe such a person? A person who cannot even behave in a moral, righteous way. Why should we believe that that person is enlightened? So anyone can claim to be enlightened. I can say I'm enlightened, but we shouldn't believe people just because they say, according to Bhagavan, to say either I have known myself or I have not known myself, both are equally ridiculous. Because when we say we've not known ourselves, that is ignorance. There's no doubt about that. If we say we've known ourselves, the I that says I have known myself is itself ego. So this is why we should take it with a huge pinch of salt, all these claims about this person is a jnani, that person is a jnani. Who are we to judge who is a jnani?
I mean, the only argument that he wants to bring in is that he also adds from the talks, he says that Kadavelli Siddhar was also like, he was not he was not showcasing himself to be a great moral, as a virtue, but then he was an enlightened being in the talks. So this page argues that the behavior, the outward behavior, does not get impacted by the enlightenment. So this is what it is, Michael. Please go through it, and if there is anything we can discuss the next week.
Well, Bhagavan does refer in talks to Kadavelli Siddha and some other things I remember, but we need to understand all these things in context. Bhagavan isn't saying that people can behave in any way they like if they claim to be a jnani. And ultimately, we are not here to investigate who is a jnani and who is not a jnani. We are here to investigate who am I. But when ego is the root of all evil, ego is the root of all selfishness, all greed, all desire. So without ego, it's all evil is destroyed along with ego.
Thank you, Michael. I think I think that this kind of thing, even though we shouldn't be concerned with it, is because it comes up again and again. I think I'm glad that it was answered. And I think one has to be very careful about these kinds of, this thing of crazy yogis and people can do various things. On the one hand, I think there has to be care taken about what is ethical. It is not the same in all circumstances, as you said, nor is it the same in all cultures. What's acceptable in a certain tribal culture is not acceptable in Victorian England or in 20th century India. The same thing which was acceptable in India 1,000 years ago, sexually, in terms of so on, is not acceptable now, and it's not necessarily progress. So I think that it seems to me, Pandya is saying so, that that this key thing of not harming others and or oneself is very, very key. because everybody has a different personality even after enlightenment, insofar as the body goes on, and even though the personality is not there, it has become purified. I mean, there is a purification.
Yeah.
And it may behave differently from somebody else, but I
Yeah.
think there mustn't be harm. I mean, I believe Neem
Exactly,
Karoli Babu Nair,
exactly,
who was,
exactly.
yeah, for example,
Yeah.
he behaved a bit differently from others, but nobody complained, so maybe it was
Yeah,
fine, you know. So I think we have to take this with a little bit of caution.
Yeah, I think we have to be very, very cautious.
Very cautious. But thank you so much, Michael. And I think this was really important,
Yeah.
these things you said, because this comes up time and time again.
Yeah.
And certainly in
No,
practical
that's
experience.
because lots of people out there in YouTube claiming to be enlightened, giving advices. It's been, I mean, Ramana Maharshi came in the vision. That guru came in the vision. Now I'm enlightened, and it's going on, right? Like, and then they tell us, you go on and do whatever you have to do. The behavior doesn't change. See, I mean, I'm the same person as I am, and I can talk anything that I want. I mean, though Ramana Maharshi sat like
If you
that,
think
doesn't.
I am the same person, I am a person is ego. That itself is ignorance. That itself is ignorance. Yes, nowadays with YouTube, that is from time immemorial, there have been charlatans, people who have claimed to be enlightened, claimed to be holy men, who have cheated people. It's been going on from in all cultures from time immemorial. Nowadays with YouTube, people and social media, people have louder megaphones to announce their enlightenment. But the more loudly they announce it, the more, they are by saying I am enlightened. What you're actually announcing is your ignorance.
True.
Just before we end, Srini, are you there? Because
Yes, Sharon. Yeah.
Srini, do you want to share this link? So
Yeah.
there's a link which
Yeah.
Srini has
Yeah.
sent to me, which is about a movie about Ramana Maharshi, and he thinks people would benefit from it. But if you could post this to everyone in the chat box,
Yeah.
that might be
Yeah.
quite nice.
So yeah, this is a very great project that Bombay Chanakya was doing it. I watched all the episodes so far, and you can see Ramana Maharshi's life. The characters are so beautiful. I thought probably anyone can benefit out of it. It's so beautiful. So
Yes.
I'd like to just share the videos. Yeah, I'm
It's
just posting
actually
it to.
it's actually produced also by I mean Ramanashramam itself, right? Like I
Correct.
used to
Correct.
see
Yes.
this.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yeah,
I'll,
so
I'll
just
post
to
post
bring
it
it
to
to
everyone.
everybody's attention, because some people may not know it, and then it would be
Yeah.
good.
Sure.
Thank you very
I'll,
much.
okay.
Michael, should we end on that note? You've spent a great deal of
Yeah.
time, and we've had a wonderful session, and thank you so very much. And thank you everyone for these very sort of very sincere and thought-provoking questions. And we can just close with Bhagwan's mantra, but we'll keep the meeting open if anybody wants to chat a little bit, and also to sort of copy these links and so on. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Shri Ramanaya.